Steve Perry's love story ended tragically, hidden from the spotlight and constant praise. No one understood the anguish that kept him silent for so long, yet his voice was beloved by everybody. He had one true love who he thought would be with him forever, but that time never came. No amount of music could mend the wounds she had left behind. This bereavement influenced his decision-making, quietness, and rejection of marriage. Steve Perry's decision to go through life alone was influenced by the lady who broke him. Steve Perry's return to music and the woman who broke him are topics we'll be covering in this episode. Once, the guy whose voice carried one of the most iconic songs ever turned his back on his own fame. When performing became too much of a burden, Steve Perry, the man behind Don't Stop Believin', decided to leave the music industry. His life had been defined by music, yet for 20 long years he avoided it at all costs, remaining silent and out of the limelight. While he was silent, his followers began to worry that they would never hear from him again. But it wasn't stardom, fortune, or even the allure of his former band that drew him back. There was love. This was no ordinary love. It was entwined with anguish, grief, and an unbreakable vow. One must first comprehend Perry's reasons for leaving in order to comprehend his return. The song Don't Stop Believin' went platinum in 1981. A national anthem was born from it. Perry was well aware that every word of the song has a hook. There was an intention for the song to endure from the initial piano chords to the memorable chorus. The minds of individuals who were receptive to it. Audiences were captivated by every chord and melody. The weight of desire and optimism was in every word. It wasn't your average rock song. A song about never giving up, never giving in, and never giving in to despair. It was a hymn for perseverance. It was a huge success. As a result of Perry's magnificent vocals, Journey reached new heights. But there were pitfalls to success. Perry had transformed into a different person by the late 90s, when he stopped performing for his followers. He had a full tank. He was exhausted from the never-ending touring, the protracted recording sessions, and the constant pressure to produce new music. His life's work, which he had been dedicated to since he was 7 years old, suddenly seemed like an overwhelming responsibility. When he reached a breaking point where music no longer brought him joy, he subsequently described it as an emotional collapse. It wasn't that his love for music faded. What caused him to move away was the fact that he no longer felt the profound connection that had previously resided within him. He slipped into oblivion, abandoning the life that had catapulted him to fame, because he had no intention of ever coming back. Perry did not say a word for a long time. He never really returned to the limelight, instead making infrequent cameos and occasional voiceovers. The song Don't Stop Believin' appeared to have an eternal life due to the incessant singing by fans all around the globe, although the voice behind it remained anonymous. Television and movies breathed fresh life into the song, bringing its powerful message back to the world. But Perry remained distant. It seemed like the music had survived him longer than he had. Perry kept his personal life under wraps throughout those peaceful years. The wedding never happened. He was terrified by the thought alone. The things he witnessed as a child, particularly his parents' hardships, had a lasting impact on him. His skepticism was further exacerbated by witnessing the traumatic divorces of his bandmates and friends. He was in relationships and wrote uplifting music like Oh Sherry, his solo success, but he never really let himself be loved. He was never able to push himself forward. Prior to a certain day, all of it changed. Those who think their finest days are over are usually surprised by how life turns out. A woman entered Perry's life at the last possible moment, delivering that unexpected surprise. She was more than a pal. She had an unmatched ability to move him emotionally. Perry experienced the first ever overwhelming sensation of love, being entangled in a profound and genuine connection. The cruel twist, though, came along with that love. Her life was running out of gas. Their bond was delicate and susceptible to breakage. Experienced a wide range of emotions, from joy to sorrow. Something new had happened for Perry, who had steered clear of marriage and other long-term obligations. Even if he had discovered love at last, he had to confront the fact that time was of the essence. His beloved was engaged in an unwinnable struggle. She begged him for something in her dying days that might alter his destiny. He vowed to her that he would go back into music. The promise was too good to pass up. Perry had told himself for a long time that he had reached the end of his musical career. He stepped away, let silence reign, and had burned out. Now, though, with love guiding him and sorrow casting a shadow, he felt an even stronger pull than fatigue. He would never abandon her. Her desire turned become his purpose. So, Steve Perry made a triumphant return after a long absence. Resuming recording, he discovered his voice in the music and the emotions he conveyed. His talent remained intact despite the years of quiet. On the contrary, they added nuance to it. grief, devotion, experience, and the promise that brought him back all found their way into his music. The carefree youth that had once sang of city boys and girls from tiny towns was long gone. Time had made him wiser and filled him with tales that only an ancient soul could tell. His return has nothing to do with seeking recognition or trying to recreate his earlier glory days. Love was the central theme. The woman who had moved him deeply but had departed too quickly had bestowed upon him a final blessing: the ability to sing once more. He found the connection he had thought had been lost through her. In every note, her memory was carried. Each and every song became an ode. There is more to Perry's life than music. Life, love, and loss are the themes. This is a story about the power of a single individual to transform the world, even if just for a moment. Promises made in suffering and the bravery to uphold them are major themes. Resuming an activity you had previously given up on, this time for the benefit of another person you cared about, is at the heart of the story. People today perceive more than just a singer resuming his career when they hear Steve Perry's voice. The individual who honored his promise is heard by them. They hear the sound of love. They listen to the story of a person who lost faith but eventually found a reason to believe again. Steve Perry's life is ultimately about more than just a rock star's ups and downs. Even when it seems like all hope is lost, love has the ability to renew desire. The piece explores the power of heartfelt music to mend broken hearts and preserve cherished memories. In the end, it's all about a voice that was never really gone. It was just waiting for the perfect opportunity, the perfect excuse, and the perfect promise to come back. Poems about love. Some love stories in music seem to transcend the lives of the people who experienced them. Some of these tales live on in memory not just for the heartfelt emotions they evoked, but also for the music that was inspired by them. Among the most memorable is the relationship that unfolded between Journey's golden voice Steve Perry and the woman who captivated him to the point that he immortalized her in a song, Sherry Swafford. Some have likened their relationship to a 1980s Romeo and Juliet because of how intense and dramatic it was. Many thought their connection was unbreakable when it was first formed. That will be remembered for all time. On his debut solo album, Steve sung and wrote about his beloved Sherry. Oh Sherry was a huge hit off of his 1984 album Street Talk. This was no ordinary love ballad. It was an unfiltered admission of guilt. For Steve, it was a means to immortalize their love, broadcasting to the world the sensitivity and tenderness he experienced. Everyone could tell Sherry was his soul mate since his emotions were evident in every note. Many thought the story would conclude with a marriage and perhaps a lifelong commitment. But as we all know, life doesn't always work according to plan, and our most idyllic dreams can come true. Their romance flourished, and Steve's career followed suit. The pressures of touring, recording, and stardom were mounting, and his voice was reaching new heights. From the outside, Sherry's life appeared dazzling, but loving someone who was always captivated by music was anything but. Both of them were burdened by the persistent demands and never-ending schedules. Under the strain of such expectations, the once ferocious passion between them began to wane. The strain and loneliness caused fissures that were impossible to mend, no matter how much love they had for one another. Love couldn't bear the weight forever. The once admired unbreakable bond between them has now broken down. Many admirers were devastated by the news since they had hoped they would continue. Breakup meant more than simply losing a beloved partner for Sherry. Along with it, her time in the limelight came to a close. She opted to completely distance herself from celebrity after being featured in a love story that was performed on the radio. For a long time, hardly anyone spoke about her. After she disappeared into seclusion, many began to wonder what became of the lady who had written the lyrics to a hit song of the era. Reappearances by Sherry did not occur until 2013. She spoke with author Mark Tyler Nobleman and told him her experience. She discussed her life since leaving Steve Perry in that encounter. She was clean about her infertility and lack of marriage. On the contrary, she delighted in the little things. Far from the fame that formerly came with her name, she created a profession as an esthetician and yoga teacher. Sherry hid herself among the things that brought her joy: nature, flowers, and the simple pleasures of life. Living a low-key existence away from the limelight provided her serenity. However, for many years, Steve held onto the recollections of their love. At the height of Journey's fame in 2011, he confessed his profound love for her and the difficulty of balancing their relationship. Glitter, enthusiasm, and seemingly infinite success were visible to everyone on the outside. On the other hand, things were drastically different behind the scenes. Loving someone whose life was consumed by a demanding profession was never an easy task. For many, it was a nightmare come true. A hefty toll was instead taken by both of them. Their romance may have ended, but it had an effect that lasted long after they broke up. The song, "Oh, Sherry," evolved into something much more. Real love, passion, desire, and the difficulties of balancing one's private life with one's public persona were all symbolized by it. Not a nameless muse inspired this composition. Unlike many others, Sherry was the intended recipient. Steve's passion was apparent in the words that filled it. That reality resonated with countless individuals. He let his emotions shine through in the song. Despite the breakup, the song continued to be played. An exquisite aspect of music is this very thing. Rather than letting life pass by, it captures a fleeting moment and keeps it alive indefinitely. Oshiri gave Steve and Sherry a lasting tribute to their fleeting love. His audience can still sense the depth of his emotion, the authenticity of his words, and the strength of the connection that made them possible. Sherry decided she didn't want to be a celebrity forever. She went into seclusion when her role in Steve's story concluded. Many others could have made the same decision she did. Unwanted attention is a common consequence of being associated with a celebrity. Furthermore, the spotlight rarely fades gracefully when a relationship ends. Sherry chose quiet over attention and stepped back entirely. Her life serves as a cautionary tale about the transient nature of celebrity, particularly for those who feel a kinship with it via the celebrity of another. With the help of one of the most popular songs of that era, her name was instantly recognizable. However, she embraced solitude after her romance with Steve ended and the reverberation of that song faded. She achieved her own brand of contentment by removing herself from the whirlwind of fame in this way. Steve's adventure diverged. He shocked everyone in 2018 by making a triumphant comeback to music after an extended period of silence. With the publication of his new record, he brought back the sound that had characterized an entire generation. Even though he had been gone from music for a while, his return demonstrated that it was still a part of him. Love and loss frequently leave behind more than just sadness. His comeback was motivated by inspiration he discovered in unexpected places. Additionally, they impart power. Upon reflection, the tale of Steve and Sherry goes beyond being a mere footnote in the annals of music. Their love is the driving force behind "Oh Sherry," and it's evidence of how genuine feelings may influence creative expression. Steve may never have shown such a vulnerable side if they hadn't gone through those tough times. Even though their relationship ended, it gave millions of us the gift of that song and the raw emotion it conveys. Following a breakup, it depicts the decisions people make. Steve immortalized their tale in song, ensuring that it would endure for all time. Sherry preferred to keep it a secret, seeking solace in life's more subdued moments. Their stories intertwined to reveal a tale of love, loss, and the myriad ways in which people cope with the absence of romantic love. "Oh Sherry" is more than simply an 80s smash, it's a timeless classic. They are reliving the highs and lows of a true love affair, complete with shared experiences, emotions, and memories. Steve Perry's heart is singing as he remembers the woman he loved. Every time the song is performed, Sherry's ghost is there, even though she chose to leave the spotlight. A love that brought an end to the quiet. Steve Perry's life took a surprising turn in 2011. Away from the world he previously dominated musically, he had resided for a long time. He had left behind the spotlights, the fame, and the stages that had once followed him around. Less activity, more reflection, and frequent feelings of isolation had become his daily routine. However, in its enigmatic way, life was on the verge of bestowing upon him something that would revolutionize his entire existence. Something that is beautiful, painful, and everlasting. Initiating the journey was a visit to his friend Patty Jenkins, a renowned director renowned for her imaginative vision and talent for crafting emotionally engaging stories. A TV movie regarding breast cancer was her current project, an endeavor with the goal of bringing authenticity, diversity, and feeling to the silver screen. Steve had no clue that a brief viewing of the film, which Patty had shown him, would completely disrupt his life. His gaze fell on a woman on TV among the many who appeared. She had an air of subtle tenderness. Though she did not play a pivotal role or remain for very long, her mere presence moved him profoundly. As a psychotherapist, Kelly Nash has fought breast cancer for many years. It could have been a mere blip in the eye of another. That little smile, though, had an impact on Steve that went right to his core. A feeling arose within him. Inquiring about Patty's possession of Kelly's email, he turned to her. Knowing her acquaintance well, Patty inquired as to the reason. Knowing Steve, she could tell he wouldn't go after a virtual stranger. Even he was confused and did not know the answer. He could only remark that Kelly's smile had an air of significance, practically impervious to disapproval. Charm was missing. That was not all it took. Even in the midst of her suffering, there was something more profound, something vital. Despite her agreement to seek out, Patty surprised him with some unexpected news and cut him off. The cancer had returned to Kelly. It had become more than just a distant recollection. It had progressed to her lungs and bones. Defying death was her only option. He was rendered speechless by such reality. He considered stepping away for a second, hoping the idea would just go away. He reflected on all that he had already let go of, including his mother and the career he had abandoned, a father whose health was deteriorating, and his grandparents. The weight of loss was already pressing down on him. I don't see the point of inviting more people. Why would anyone want to get into a story that hinted at tragedy right off the bat? However, he could not shake the idea. Despite his fears, the draw was too much. Eventually, he instructed Patty to launch the email. They had supper together after Kelly agreed to meet him. The gathering that started off as a casual get-together ended up into something completely unexpected. It was the first spark of an eternal love that would overcome all odds. Their friendship blossomed rapidly and profoundly, and they became quite close. Although they were both aware that time was fleeting, they spent the year and a half they spent together building a life full of love, laughter, and memories that seemed to stand the test of time. Steve was cognizant of the physician's warnings when he began the partnership. Kelly was short on time. No amount of medical intervention could have weakened the sickness. Even still, he held fast to a conviction that the majority would deem unattainable. Their love, he secretly believed, might heal her. He had faith that the intensity of their emotions could cure her of the illness that had returned to her body. They shared a studio apartment in the Big Apple. They saw an entire universe within that little box, even if it could have seemed insignificant to outsiders. They spoke not only words but truths that were sensed in every touch and sight within those walls. Kelly had a conversation with him one night that he will never forget. She assured him that no matter how bad her disease got, it would never be able to break the love they had. To a degree he had never felt before, that idea penetrated his soul. Having an idea wasn't enough. Every fiber of his being responded to it. Though brief, their time together was rich with significance. Knowing that Kelly's life might end at any moment did not diminish her strength. It pushed her to seek meaning in life, in pursuits that would endure beyond her mortal coil. She wanted to leave Steve with a sense of purpose rather than just sadness, and she discovered it in their love. She sought his word before she walked away. Do not go back into seclusion, she pleaded with him. She was afraid that he would go back to his old ways of hiding and being silent once she left him. That would render everything meaningless to her. She hoped their love would lift him up, not bring him down, in his time of need. With an oath, Steve had promised her. Making that commitment was not simple. After that, he stayed up all night thinking about her remarks. Her request for him to give their narrative significance made sense to him. He wanted to make sure her life and their love weren't for nothing. She wanted to leave him strong, so she did it this way, even after she was unable to remain at his side any longer. Steve had never encountered such a crushing loss until Kelly passed away. This was unlike any other loss he had experienced. He had never been so broken by a loss like this. He was nearly overwhelmed by the weight of his sadness for 2 years. Not only was he sad, but he felt completely broken, as if every part of him had been shattered. Still, a sense of normalcy started to creep back, and despite the agony, he began composing music once more. The long-suppressed melodies that had been building within him finally broke through. Inspiring him to keep moving on was the vow he had taken to Kelly. Despite her brief life, he knew that the love they shared was eternal and had a purpose that could not be erased. There was more than just love between them. What love can accomplish, even when faced with death, was brought to light by this. It taught him that the value of a relationship may be measured not in years, but in the intensity of its feelings. He felt like he lost a part of himself, but Kelly restored it. She inspired him to reopen his heart to everything: love, life, music, and the world at large. Although brief, Steve Perry's narrative involving Kelly Nash was impactful. Love may produce beginnings even when life seems to be full of endings. Her spirit lived on in all the music he composed, the songs he sung again, and the moments he refused to keep hidden from view, even after she passed away. An energized voice. And, waking up in the light. Life had started to change again for Steve Perry after the 18 months that had gone since Nash's death. For a long time, he had protected himself by being silent. Yet, at this very moment, sound began to emerge. He did not make a big deal out of his comeback to music. It crept in subtly, by friendship, via baby steps, and had the bravery to return to the stage in front of those who yearned to hear his voice. While things were slow for Perry, he was captivated with the band Eels. Their sincere songs, their energy, and their sound were all things he admired. Sitting in the audience wasn't the only thing that mattered to him. Frequently, He would drop by their rehearsals, remain close by during their performances, and occasionally even join in on their informal games. Similar to croquet matches where the emphasis was on having fun rather than winning. A rekindling of his inner fire occurred to him gradually throughout these times, one that he believed he had misplaced. Perry was also spotted by the band's lead singer, Mark E. Everett. Following all those trips and hours of listening, Everett finally asked Perry if he would like to immerse himself in their world, even if only for a time. Though unassuming, the invitation held deep significance. Perry had long ago sealed off this possibility, but now there was a tiny doorway leading into it. That was Perry's opinion as well. They collaborated on the music selection, resulting in a set that fused modern and classic styles. Perry had a profound emotional investment in the song, "It's a Motherfucker," which he was able to express in every word. Several travel classics, which served as reminders of the voice that had once captivated audiences, arrived at the same time. As May 2014 rolled around, made the long journey to St. Paul, Minnesota, to see the Eels perform at the Fitzgerald Theater. As the house lights went down that night, Perry and the band took the stage. Perry saw it as more than simply a surprise appearance, even though the crowd had no idea. A revelation occurred at that same time. Somewhere within him changed when the initial notes slipped out of his mouth. Standing before an audience and singing his heart out was something he had almost forgotten how to do. But the happiness came flooding back as he met the gaze of the audience, felt their enthusiasm, and returned their voice. It had a new vitality. It was correct. The music was only one part of this presentation. The focus was on recovery. Perry had started writing prior to Nash's death, but he was unable to finish because of his sadness. Her passing elevated the songs to a higher plane of significance. At this point, they were more than just tunes. He could no longer bury these truths, feelings, promises, and recollections. Perry created a studio in his home, determined to bring these tunes to life. It was not showy, and it wasn't related to what the industry needed. It was his haven, his personal area. He enlisted the aid of musicians and co-songwriters who could give form to his innermost musical ideas. No record company was micromanaging his every move. He is not being hurried by any director. He was free from any kind of deadline pressure. The only way he could start creating again was with independence, so he paid for it all himself, piece by piece. Above all else, this independence meant the world to Perry. He encouraged the group to experiment and fall short if necessary. Nobody was pressuring him to do anything. He was alone, with no one standing behind him to demand action. Just he, his songs, and his recollections. This gave rise to Traces, an album that created the impression that he had never departed, despite the fact that he had been absent for 20 years. Traces was more than simply a soundtrack. Perry was honoring his vow to Nash, who had asked him to keep her memory alive through his music. The album featured his signature smooth rock sound, but it also had the burden of his journey, the sadness of loss, and the joy of coming back. Perry had protected his solitude for a long time. He had withdrawn from public view in order to shield himself from harm, to lead a life of relative obscurity, and to avoid the scrutiny of others. There were traces, though, and he realized he had to act. He granted more interviews than he had ever permitted himself during Journey's heyday. He met with reporters. He became vulnerable and allowed others to enter. Even though he had previously walled himself off from life, he now recognized the significance of this. His response was sincere and full of emotion when questioned about his current state of mind following the loss of his beloved, his return, and the fortitude to speak about topics near and dear to his heart. According to him, it was an incredible feeling of release, not euphoria devoid of grief. Sharing stories from his past, including those involving Nash, music, and memories, was like releasing a burden he had been carrying for far too long. Perry found solace in the act. Because of this, he was able to unlock doors that he had previously locked, allowing others to see the real him. It was time, he conceded. It was time for him to finally let out all of his pent-up emotions and speak his mind. Now that all that time had passed, he felt prepared to be open and honest with people. Being truthful with himself is perhaps even more crucial. Amazing things began to happen as he proceeded along this road. Sharing his feelings no longer hurt him. In fact, it brought him joy. Being open brought him comfort rather than fear. The significance of this being about more than just an album and returning to the stage became apparent to him. It centered on completeness. He returned in a low-key manner. It was calm, steady, and full of emotion. A man who had before withdrawn into quiet was suddenly rising to his feet with a soft power. Both the darkness of love's unfulfilled promises and the light of its fulfilled ones shone through his songs. It was more than a concert for those who listened to him and gazed into his eyes as he sang once more. A gift that was. It was a rebirth for Perry personally.